The Galactic Council, an ancient and seemingly invincible body, had ruled the galaxy with an iron fist for millennia. Composed of representatives from the most advanced and powerful species, the Council saw itself as the ultimate authority in the known universe. Their dominance was absolute, through a combination of advanced technology, strategic alliances, and ruthless enforcement. They had subjugated countless worlds and brought entire civilizations to their knees. Any species that dared to resist their edicts was swiftly and brutally crushed, their planets reduced to ashes as a warning to others. The Council's power was so vast, and their methods so fearsome, that few ever questioned their supremacy. Over the centuries, the Galactic Council's reputation grew to mythical proportions. They were seen as gods, unassailable and all-knowing, whose word was law. Their fleets, comprised of the most advanced warships ever constructed, patrolled the galaxy like silent sentinels, ever ready to strike down any hint of rebellion. The Council members themselves were arrogant, steeped in the belief that they were the rightful rulers of the galaxy. To them, other species were mere subjects, inferior beings who existed to serve the will of the Council. In their arrogance, the Council had become blind to the changing tides of the galaxy. They had grown complacent, relying on their past victories and the fear they had instilled to maintain control. They failed to notice the subtle shifts in power, the quiet rise of species they had once dismissed as irrelevant. Among these was humanity, a species that had only recently emerged on the galactic stage. Humanity's ascent had been rapid and, to the Council's eyes, surprising. In just a few centuries, humans had gone from a relatively unknown species to a burgeoning power. Their technology, though not as advanced as the Council's, was innovative and versatile. Their adaptability, combined with a fierce determination, allowed them to thrive in environments where others faltered. Humanity's ability to learn and integrate new knowledge quickly set them apart, but the Council, in its hubris, saw them as nothing more than an upstart race, ambitious, but ultimately insignificant. The Council's view of humanity was further colored by their belief in their own superiority. They saw the humans as reckless and undisciplined, prone to emotional decisions rather than the calculated logic the Council prided itself on. To the Council, humanity's rapid expansion was a nuisance, nothing more. Their emissaries spoke condescendingly of humans as a species that had gotten too big for its britches, one that would soon be put in its place. It was within this context that the Galactic Council made a fateful decision. Believing that humanity needed to be reminded of its place in the galaxy, the Council convened to discuss the so-called human problem. The debates were short, as there was little doubt among the Council members about the course of action to take. They would impose harsh sanctions on Earth, crippling its economy and stifling its growth. If humanity resisted, as the Council expected they might, a swift military strike would follow, one that would decimate human defenses and force them into submission. The decision was unanimous. The Council, confident in their overwhelming power, saw no need for negotiation or diplomacy. They believed humanity would either comply or be obliterated, either outcome was acceptable to them. The Council's fleets were mobilized, and the sanctions were imposed with the cold efficiency that had become their trademark. The message was clear: submit, or face annihilation. Yet, as the Council's ships moved into position and their emissaries delivered their ultimatum, there was a sense of unease that some members could not shake. It was a fleeting feeling, quickly dismissed as irrational, but it was there nonetheless. The humans, despite the Council's expectations, did not immediately submit. Instead, they responded with a defiance that was both unexpected and alarming. There were reports of humans rallying their fleets, of scientists and engineers working tirelessly to adapt their technology for war. The Council's spies whispered of secret alliances, of hidden weapons and strategies that humanity had kept in reserve. For the first time in many years, the Galactic Council began to question the wisdom of their decision. But by then, it was too late to turn back. The wheels of war had been set in motion, and the Council, in its arrogance, could not admit to the possibility of defeat. They had chosen to provoke humanity, confident in their ability to crush any resistance, but they had underestimated the resolve and resourcefulness of their chosen enemy. In the cold, silent reaches of space, The stage was set for a conflict that would shake the very foundations of the galaxy. The Council, so sure of its dominance, was about to learn a harsh lesson. They had chosen the wrong species to provoke. The moment the Galactic Council's ultimatum reached Earth, it sent shockwaves through every level of human society. The audacity of the Council's demands, paired with the looming threat of annihilation, would have crushed the spirit of many other species. But humanity was different. The initial shock quickly gave way to a fierce resolve that spread like wildfire. Leaders from every corner of the globe convened in emergency sessions, military commanders were summoned, and the best minds in science and engineering were mobilized. There was no hesitation, no talk of surrender. Humanity had been pushed into a corner, and their response was immediate and unequivocal: they would fight. Humanity's leaders, seasoned by centuries of navigating global crises, moved with a swiftness that took even their own people by surprise. Communication networks buzzed with activity as orders were dispatched, alliances solidified, and plans set into motion. There was a shared understanding among them. This was not just a battle for survival but a fight for the future of their species. The response was coordinated, precise, and relentless. The Council had expected panic and disarray, but instead, they were met with a unified front, determined and unyielding. As the Council's fleets began their approach, humanity unveiled the true extent of their military might. For years, they had quietly developed their technology, pushing the boundaries of what was possible, often under the guise of peaceful exploration and defense. Now, they were ready to show the galaxy what they were capable of. Advanced warships, sleek and deadly, emerged from hidden shipyards. These vessels were not just powerful, they were ingeniously designed to adapt and evolve, incorporating the latest advancements in AI, energy shielding, and weaponry. The Council's fleets were vast, but humanity's were versatile, each ship a masterpiece of engineering, capable of both strategic strikes and brutal close-quarters combat. The first encounter between human forces and the Council's armada was nothing short of spectacular. The Council, confident in their superiority, advanced with the expectation of a swift and decisive victory. But as their ships entered human-controlled space, they were met with a resistance unlike anything they had ever faced. Human warships moved with an agility that defied the Council's calculations, slipping through their formations with precision and striking with devastating accuracy. Advanced stealth technology rendered human ships nearly invisible to the Council's sensors, allowing them to launch surprise attacks that left the enemy reeling. Humanity's tactics were as varied as they were effective. Where the Council relied on overwhelming force, humanity employed guerrilla warfare, electronic warfare, and psychological operations that sowed confusion and fear among the Council's ranks. Human commanders, drawing on centuries of military history, adapted ancient strategies to space combat, outmaneuvering and outthinking their opponents at every turn. The Council's massive, lumbering battleships found themselves outpaced and outgunned by smaller, faster human vessels, which struck with surgical precision and then vanished into the void. The first battle was a catastrophic defeat for the Council. Their ships, once symbols of invincibility, were torn apart by a foe they had considered beneath them. The Council's confidence, so unshakable just days before, began to erode as the reality of the situation set in. They had underestimated humanity, and now they were paying the price. Reports of the battle spread quickly through the galaxy, and the Council's member species, once united in their belief in the Council's supremacy, began to question their leaders. How could a species so young, so seemingly insignificant, inflict such a blow? Inside the chambers of the Galactic Council, the mood shifted from arrogance to unease. The initial bravado was gone, replaced by heated debates and rising tensions. Council members who had once spoken with certainty now questioned the wisdom of provoking humanity. Some called for immediate retaliation with even greater force, while others argued for a diplomatic solution before the situation spiraled further out of control. But no consensus could be reached. The Council, so used to dictating terms, was now facing a challenge they had not anticipated, a species that refused to be cowed, that fought with a ferocity and ingenuity they had never encountered. The Council's leaders were forced to confront a harsh truth: they had gravely misjudged humanity. What they had seen as a simple exercise in power projection had become a full-scale war, one in which they were not guaranteed victory. For the first time in living memory, the Galactic Council found itself on the defensive, scrambling to adjust to an enemy that defied all expectations. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as the war unfolded, realizing that the Council, the undisputed rulers of the stars, had indeed chosen the wrong species to provoke. The initial battles were only the beginning. As news of humanity's defiance spread, the conflict quickly expanded beyond the borders of Earth. The Galactic Council, once confident in their ability to quash any resistance, found themselves drawn into a war that engulfed entire star systems. What began as a punitive action against a single species evolved into a full-scale galactic conflict. Human forces, no longer content to merely defend their territory, launched strategic strikes deep into Council-controlled space, targeting key installations, supply lines, and outposts. These strikes were not random but carefully calculated to weaken the Council's grip on power. Humanity's military had always been a force of innovation, and now, with the stakes higher than ever, they pushed their technology and tactics to new heights. Fleets moved with precision, disrupting the Council's logistics and leaving their forces scrambling to respond. Council supply convoys were ambushed, outposts were overrun, and their communication networks were systematically dismantled. Each human victory chipped away at the Council's aura of invincibility, and the once mighty armada of the Council found itself increasingly outmatched by human ingenuity and tenacity. The escalation of the war did not go unnoticed by other species within the galaxy. For centuries, the Council's rule had been absolute, maintained through fear and oppression. Countless species had suffered under their yoke, their planets exploited, and their peoples subjugated. But now, for the first time, they saw a glimmer of hope, a species that not only stood against the Council but was winning. Quietly, at first, these species began to reach out to humanity. What started as covert communications soon blossomed into full-fledged alliances. These were not formal agreements written on parchment but bonds forged in the fires of shared struggle and a common enemy. Humanity welcomed these new allies, recognizing the strength in unity. Each species brought something unique to the table: knowledge of the Council's tactics, access to resources, and specialized technologies. Together, they formed a coalition that the Council had not anticipated. This alliance, born out of desperation and a thirst for freedom, quickly proved to be a formidable force. The Council, accustomed to fighting isolated enemies, now faced a united front that threatened their very existence. As the war raged on, the Council's desperation became increasingly apparent. They deployed their most powerful fleets, ships that had once been the pride of their armada, in a last-ditch effort to crush the growing rebellion. These fleets, armed with the most advanced weaponry and commanded by the Council's top strategists, were supposed to turn the tide of the war. But humanity and their allies were ready. Drawing on their combined strengths, they devised strategies that exploited the Council's weaknesses, turning their superior numbers and firepower against them. The battles that followed were some of the fiercest the galaxy had ever seen. In one significant engagement, known later as the Battle of Orion's Rift, the Council's fleet clashed with the coalition forces in a conflict that would determine the fate of the war. The Council, confident in their overwhelming firepower, launched a direct assault, aiming to obliterate the coalition in a single decisive strike. But the coalition had anticipated this and laid a trap. Utilizing advanced stealth technology and coordinated tactics, human and allied forces struck from multiple angles, overwhelming the Council's fleet. The battle was brutal and intense, with both sides suffering heavy losses. But in the end, it was humanity's ingenuity and the coalition's unity that prevailed. The Council's fleet, once the terror of the galaxy, was decimated. Ships that had once symbolized the Council's dominance were reduced to debris, floating aimlessly in the cold void of space. The few Council ships that survived the battle retreated in disarray, their command structure shattered, and their morale in ruins. The defeat at Orion's Rift sent shockwaves through the Galactic Council. The unthinkable had happened: their most powerful fleet had been destroyed, and their control over the galaxy was slipping. Within the Council's chambers, panic and chaos reigned. Desperation set in as Council members turned on each other, blaming one another for the failure. Some advocated for total war, using weapons of mass destruction to end the conflict once and for all, while others argued for negotiations, hoping to salvage what remained of their power. But it was too late. The Council's unity had fractured, and their once unshakable confidence had crumbled. As the coalition advanced, reclaiming territory and liberating oppressed worlds, the Council's hold on the galaxy weakened further. More species, emboldened by the coalition's successes, joined the fight, adding their strength to the growing movement against the Council. The war had reached a tipping point, and it was clear to all that the days of the Galactic Council's reign were numbered. They had provoked humanity, expecting submission, but instead they had ignited a fire that would burn away their centuries of dominance. The war had reached a critical juncture. Within the once mighty Galactic Council, the cracks were beginning to show. What had been a unified front was now unraveling under the pressure of repeated defeats and the growing strength of the human-led coalition. Member species, once loyal and unwavering in their support of the Council, started to question the leadership that had led them into this disastrous conflict. Whispers of dissent grew louder in the Council's chambers, as representatives from various species began to doubt the wisdom of continuing a war that seemed increasingly unwinnable. Some factions within the Council even started to consider the unthinkable, switching sides or seeking a separate peace with humanity in a bid to preserve their own interests. Humanity and their allies sensed this growing discord and moved swiftly to capitalize on it. Recognizing that the Council was now on the defensive, human leadership, with its characteristic boldness and ingenuity, orchestrated a series of coordinated strikes designed to cripple the Council's remaining military assets. These were not random attacks but carefully planned operations that targeted the Council's critical infrastructure, supply depots, shipyards, and command centers. The coalition's forces struck with precision, hitting multiple targets simultaneously, leaving the Council scrambling to defend itself on multiple fronts. Under the leadership of key human figures, the coalition executed these operations with a level of coordination and efficiency that the Council had never anticipated. Human commanders, drawing on their deep well of strategic knowledge, inspired not just their own people but their alien allies as well. The coalition became a well-oiled machine, each species contributing its strengths to the overall war effort. The tide of the war had clearly shifted, and humanity's ascendancy was now undeniable. The turning point came with a decisive victory that would mark the beginning of the end for the Galactic Council. In a daring and meticulously planned operation, the coalition set its sights on one of the Council's major strongholds, a fortified planet that had served as a symbol of the Council's power for centuries. The planet, heavily defended and believed to be impregnable, was a key hub for the Council's military operations, and its capture would send a clear message that the old order was crumbling. The battle for the stronghold was fierce, with both sides fully aware of its significance. The Council, desperate to hold on to this bastion of power, threw everything they had into its defense. But humanity and their allies were relentless. Using a combination of brute force and clever tactics, they managed to breach the planet's formidable defenses. The coalition's forces, driven by a shared determination to end the war, overwhelmed the Council's defenders. In a stunning victory, the stronghold fell, its capture marking a significant blow to the Council's ability to continue the war. The fall of this stronghold sent shockwaves through the galaxy. The Council, once seen as unassailable, was now reeling from the loss. Panic and chaos spread among the Council's leadership, as they realized that their grip on power was slipping. Desperation set in, and in their final attempts to turn the tide of the war, the Council resorted to increasingly unethical and extreme measures. They authorized the use of experimental weapons, deployed their remaining forces in reckless attacks, and even considered sacrificing entire planets in a bid to stave off defeat. But these actions only served to further alienate their member species, many of whom could no longer support such a corrupt and faltering regime. As defections increased and the Council's forces continued to dwindle, it became clear that the war was effectively over. The coalition, now with the upper hand, pressed their advantage, liberating more systems and bringing the remaining Council-held territories under their control. Humanity's leadership remained steadfast, guiding the coalition with a focus on achieving a just and lasting peace. The Council, once feared and respected, was now a shadow of its former self, its authority shattered, and its members divided. The Galactic Council had misjudged humanity from the start, and now they were paying the ultimate price. Their empire, built on arrogance and fear, was crumbling before their eyes. The war, which they had believed would be a simple demonstration of their power, had instead become their undoing. Humanity, the species they had once considered insignificant, had risen to lead a coalition that would reshape the galaxy. The turning point had been reached, and there was no going back. The old order was dying, and a new era, led by those who had once been underestimated, was dawning. The Galactic Council, once the unchallenged rulers of the galaxy, had finally fallen. Their reign, marked by oppression and arrogance, crumbled as their forces were defeated, their strongholds captured, and their leadership shattered. The final blow came with the capture of the Council's most senior leaders, who were either taken into custody or met their end in the chaos of the war's conclusion. Those who survived faced trials for their crimes, while others fled into exile, knowing they could never return to the galaxy they had once dominated. The Council, as it had been known, was no more, a relic of a bygone era, swept away by the tide of change. In the aftermath of the war, humanity emerged as a major power, not through conquest, but through the leadership and resilience they had shown throughout the conflict. The galaxy looked to humans not just as warriors, but as leaders capable of guiding them into a new era. Humanity took on the monumental task of rebuilding, offering a vision of governance that was fairer and more just than anything the galaxy had seen before. Where the Council had ruled through fear, humanity offered respect and cooperation. They sought to establish a new order based on equality, where all species had a voice, and none were subjected to the tyranny that had defined the Council's rule. This new order was symbolized by the formation of a galactic alliance, a coalition of species united not by force, but by shared ideals and mutual respect. Humanity, along with their closest allies, played a central role in this alliance, ensuring that the mistakes of the past would not be repeated. The alliance's charter emphasized the principles of freedom, cooperation, and the protection of all sentient life. Each member species, regardless of their power or influence, had an equal say in the decisions that would shape the future of the galaxy. It was a stark contrast to the old regime, where a few had held power over many. Now, the galaxy stood as a collective, bound together by the desire for peace and prosperity. Humanity's influence in the new alliance was profound. Their leadership during the war had earned them both respect and fear among the other species. They were seen as the defenders of the oppressed, the ones who had stood up to the Council and emerged victorious. But this respect was tempered by a recognition of humanity's strength, a reminder that they were not to be underestimated. Humanity, aware of this dual perception, used it to foster a sense of stability. They worked tirelessly to maintain the balance of power within the alliance, ensuring that no single species could dominate the others as the Council had done. Their approach was one of diplomacy backed by strength, a combination that kept the peace while deterring any who might seek to disrupt it. The lessons of the war were not forgotten. The galaxy had learned the dangers of underestimating others, of allowing arrogance and complacency to blind them to the realities around them. The Council's fall served as a powerful reminder that no empire, no matter how powerful, could stand against the collective will of those who yearned for freedom. The war had also highlighted the value of resilience and unity, showing that even the most diverse and disparate species could come together to achieve something greater than themselves. These lessons were enshrined in the guiding principles of the new alliance, ensuring that they would be passed down through the generations. As the galaxy entered this new era, there was a sense of hope and optimism that had not been felt for centuries. The wounds of the war were still fresh, and the challenges of rebuilding were immense, but there was also a recognition that they were on the brink of something extraordinary. The old ways had been swept away, and in their place, a new order was emerging, one where cooperation and mutual respect were the foundations of a lasting peace. Humanity, once seen as a minor species on the fringes of the galaxy, now stood at the center of this transformation. They had not sought power for its own sake, but through their actions, they had earned a place as leaders in the new galactic order. The galaxy looked to them not just for guidance, but for inspiration, as they worked together to build a future where all could thrive. The war had been brutal, and the cost had been high, but in its aftermath, the galaxy found a renewed sense of purpose. And so, under the banner of the new Galactic Alliance, the galaxy began to heal, to rebuild, and to grow. The future was uncertain, as it always is, but there was a shared belief that they were on the right path, a path forged through struggle, unity, and the unwavering belief that together, they could create a better tomorrow. The galaxy had entered a new era, one defined not by the dominance of the few, but by the strength of the many, and the promise of peace and prosperity for all.